The night the power went out, Daniel Carter understood what it truly meant to have nothing left. The small apartment fell into darkness, the heater stopped humming, and the silence pressed against his chest so hard it felt physical. He sat on the cold floor, his back against the wall, holding his 6-year-old daughter Lily close as she slept in his arms, unaware that this was their last night here. Outside, rain streaked down the window like the world itself was crying with him. In that moment, Daniel wasn't just a man who had lost a job or a home. He was a father standing at the edge of despair, terrified of the morning that was coming. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a second to pause right here. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more real, emotional stories. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across the world. Just 3 months earlier, Daniel's life, while far from perfect, had been stable. He worked as a facilities supervisor at a massive glass tower owned by one of the most powerful business groups in the city. The job didn't make him rich, but it paid the bills and kept Lily in school. Ever since his wife passed away from an illness that drained their savings and his spirit, Daniel had learned to live with exhaustion. He woke before sunrise, packed Lily's lunch, tied her shoelaces, kissed her forehead, and promised every single day that things would be okay. He believed it too, until the day everything collapsed at once. The company announced sudden restructuring. Executives in tailored suits spoke about profits and efficiency, while workers like Daniel were reduced to numbers on a list. He was called into a cold office and informed his position had been eliminated. No warning. No mercy. He walked out holding a cardboard box with his belongings, his hand shaking, his mind racing with thoughts of rent, food, and school fees. He told himself it was temporary. He would find something else. He had to. But temporary stretched into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Daniel applied everywhere, standing in lines filled with men just as desperate as he was. Some days he was overqualified, other days underqualified, most days simply ignored. His savings vanished quickly, eaten away by rent and groceries. The landlord's patience thinned. Final notices appeared on the door like quiet threats. Daniel stopped eating full meals so Lily wouldn't notice the shortage. He smiled when she laughed, even when his chest felt like it was breaking apart. The day they were forced out of the apartment was one of the hardest moments of his life. Daniel packed what little they owned into 2 bags, holding Lily's hand as they stepped onto the sidewalk with nowhere to go. The sky was painfully blue, indifferent to his suffering. Lily asked if they were going on an adventure, and Daniel nodded, because a father sometimes has to turn heartbreak into courage. They spent nights in shelters, days in libraries, pretending everything was fine. But every night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel stared at the ceiling and silently apologized to her for failing. What Daniel didn't know was that somewhere across the city, a man named Jonathan Hale was returning. Jonathan was the billionaire founder of the very company that had let Daniel go. He had been away for months, dealing with personal losses of his own, questioning the empire he had built. During his absence, decisions were made in his name, cold decisions that prioritized profit over people. When Jonathan returned, he requested a full internal review, not because of numbers, but because something inside him felt wrong. As Jonathan reviewed reports late into the night, one case caught his attention. An internal memo mentioned a former supervisor who had been praised for loyalty and integrity, yet dismissed without consideration. Jonathan remembered the man vaguely, not by name, but by an image burned into his memory. Years ago, during a surprise visit to one of his buildings, Jonathan had collapsed in a restricted area after a health episode. Most employees panicked or froze, but one man had stayed calm, helped him breathe, and quietly ensured no cameras or chaos followed. That man was Daniel Carter. Jonathan never forgot that steady presence during his weakest moment. Driven by something deeper than curiosity, Jonathan ordered his team to find Daniel. What they discovered shook him. Unemployment. Eviction. A child. Shelters. Jonathan felt a weight settle on his chest that no amount of wealth had ever prepared him for. For the first time in years, he didn't schedule a meeting or send an assistant. He went himself. Daniel was sitting on a bench outside a community center when a black car stopped nearby. He didn't notice at first, too busy watching Lily draw with chalk on the pavement, her laughter fragile but real. When Jonathan approached, dressed simply, no entourage, Daniel looked up with tired eyes that held both caution and dignity. Recognition passed slowly, like a memory surfacing through fog. Jonathan didn't speak like a billionaire or a boss. He spoke like a man who knew he owed someone something far greater than money. What followed changed Daniel's life, not in an instant of magic, but in a wave of restored humanity. Jonathan didn't offer charity. He offered belonging. He arranged temporary housing, then permanent support. He reopened Daniel's file, not to give him back the same job, but to offer him a new role built on trust and respect. More importantly, he looked Daniel in the eye and made it clear that he would not be left behind again. In that moment, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. Life didn't become perfect overnight. Healing never does. But Lily slept in a warm bed again. Daniel woke up with purpose again. Slowly, the shadows of shame and fear loosened their grip. Daniel worked hard, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel invisible. Jonathan, changed by the encounter, began reshaping his company culture, realizing success meant nothing if it crushed the very people who built it. Months later, Daniel stood in a modest but beautiful home, watching Lily run through the hallway, her laughter filling the space like sunlight. He thought about the night the power went out, about the cold floor and the fear that almost broke him. He realized that sometimes life takes everything away not to punish us, but to reveal who will stand beside us when we have nothing left. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness still exists and that hope can return even at the darkest moment, please take a second to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need them most. And before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what part of this story moved you the most, because your words might be the hope someone else is searching for. Daniel learned that night, long ago on the cold floor, that being a good father wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about holding on, loving fiercely, and believing that even when the world turns its back, a single act of humanity can change everything. The weeks that followed did not feel like a miracle montage where everything suddenly turned perfect. They felt real, slow, and fragile, like a man learning how to breathe again after nearly drowning. Daniel woke up every morning before Lily, not because he had to, but because his body still hadn't learned that survival mode was no longer necessary. He would sit at the small kitchen table of their new apartment, watching the sunrise creep through the curtains, listening to the quiet hum of a safe home, and reminding himself that this was real. They were not going to be asked to leave. There would be food today. There would be school tomorrow. And for the first time in a long while, there was a future that didn't terrify him. Returning to work was harder than Daniel expected. Walking back into the same company that had once discarded him reopened wounds he thought he had buried. The building looked the same, the polished floors and glass walls unchanged, but Daniel was different. He carried invisible scars now, lessons written into his posture and his eyes. Some employees avoided his gaze, unsure of how to treat a man who had fallen so far and then returned under the protection of the billionaire himself. Others looked at him with quiet respect. Daniel didn't demand attention. He worked harder than ever, not out of fear, but out of gratitude and resolve. He wanted to prove, not to the company but to himself, that he deserved this second chance. Jonathan Hale watched Daniel closely, not from a distance of power, but with the curiosity of a man trying to relearn empathy. The more time Jonathan spent reshaping policies and listening to stories from employees like Daniel, the more he understood how blind he had been. Numbers had once defined success for him. Now faces did. Families did. Sleepless nights and silent sacrifices did. Daniel's story was not unique, and that realization haunted Jonathan. He began implementing programs for displaced workers, emergency assistance funds, and protections for parents who were one paycheck away from losing everything. The empire slowly shifted, not because of a board decision, but because one broken man had reminded another powerful man what humanity looked like. At home, Lily changed in ways Daniel noticed immediately. The dark circles under her eyes faded. Her laughter became louder, freer. She started talking about school again, about friends, about dreams. One night, as Daniel tucked her into bed, she asked if they were still on an adventure. Daniel smiled, his throat tight, and realized that the hardest adventure was already behind them. What lay ahead was rebuilding, and this time, they weren't doing it alone. Still, Daniel carried guilt. On quiet nights, he replayed the shelter ceilings, the hunger, the fear of losing Lily to a system that didn't care how hard a father tried. He questioned whether he deserved this turnaround when so many others were still struggling. That guilt didn't weaken him. It strengthened his purpose. Daniel began volunteering on weekends, helping other single parents navigate job applications, offering rides, sharing meals. He didn't have much, but he knew what it meant to have nothing, and that made even small kindnesses powerful. One evening, months later, Daniel stood on the balcony of his apartment, the city lights stretching endlessly before him. He thought about how close he had come to giving up, How easily the world could have forgotten